HR Talent Academy on-demand presentation on how to say no without feeling guilty, presented by Lisa Abramson and Vanessa Loader, co-founders of the Mindfulness-Based Achievement.
We've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, when you've recently asked someone, in the halls at the office today, how are you doing? And everyone's default response is like, busy, crazy busy, so busy. And people are just, that's the lingo, and it's really become a sign of prestige and something that people feel good about. And we call this the busy trap, where everyone's running around saying how busy they are. And this is really one solution to this busy trap and this perpetual state of too many things going on at once is learning how to set boundaries, and especially how to set them and then let them go and not feel guilty about it. And this is really a common theme we've heard from the thousands of the women we've supported. One woman even shared with us saying, it's so important to take time for yourself, and I think when I do sometimes, I feel so self-indulgent that it makes me nervous to do it. And another woman asked us, how can I feel less guilty when I have me time? So we are going to tell you how you can take time for yourself without feeling guilty or self-indulgent, because it's so important and it leads to so many good things when we're able to prioritize what we need to do and say no to the things that don't get us anywhere.
Yeah, and like everything we teach, I wish there were a magic pill that immediately fixed everything. We're going to give you some tools today that are going to dramatically change things right away. And the real key to lasting change is small daily habits and small daily changes. And so we're going to be giving you the steps to be doing just that. So this research is based on Liz Vesterland, and she's a PhD researcher who I heard talk about exactly this topic about a year ago, and her research findings literally stopped me in my tracks. So whether it's volunteering for a committee or agreeing to pick up the slack for a sick colleague at work, her research, she's a professor of economics at the University of Pittsburgh, and her research showed that women are more likely than men to do three things. So here's the first one. The first one is we're more likely than men to volunteer to do non-promotable tasks.
So I'm going to give you an example of this, and looking back, I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but despite being the youngest and the first female on the executive team, I actually volunteered to do the Costco run for bottled water and various snacks and chocolates for our company offsite. It's embarrassing. But granted, I do love Costco a lot more than the average person, but still, having to make this trip in the middle of the day, it meant that I had to stay late into the evening to get my real work done, and it was so unnecessary. I mean, there's delivery services to do this. Now there's even Google Shopping Express that can same-day deliver anything you need. And I volunteered. I put myself up for this, and it didn't do me any good.
That's the first one. The second thing that she found in her research was that women are more likely than men. They're more likely to be asked to do non-promotable tasks.
Yeah, I was definitely asked to plan the holiday party. You can raise your virtual hand if you're saying, yes, I've also been asked to plan the holiday party. No one wins from that.
And then the third thing she found is that women are more likely than men to say yes when asked to do these mundane tasks. And, women are overcommitted in a lot of ways, and we tend to feel more of a psychological burden when we're asked to do someone a favor. This is the part of the research that I really loved. So part of her research showed that while considering how to respond to a request, 31% of women felt worn out, were worried, had a difficult time saying no, and were afraid of being perceived as someone who is not helpful. In comparison, less than 10% of the men felt this way. So 31% of women versus 10% of men. And men, in contrast, were concerned with whether or not it was a good use of their time, would it help their career, and would the person owe them a favor in the future. So men very focused on, okay, what do I get out of this? How is this going to help my career in the long term? And will that person reciprocate in the future? So that, first of all, just becoming aware of this research is game-changing for all of us, because for me at least, when I have a hard time saying no now, I think about the research and I realize that I want to change that pattern in myself, and it kind of gives me a little more gumption behind my no. So just from listening to this part, you've already gotten kind of a new mindset around how women are compared to men and what you can do differently. Now we're going to go into some specific tactics to give you some tips for how we can change this pattern. We're going to give you 7 tips to help you set boundaries and say no with ease.
Yeah, so the very first one is to start small. So to begin with, pick something small that you'd like to say no to, and then see how it feels to get that off your plate entirely. So once you've refused to do something small, you'll see that people don't hate you, life goes on, it's not the end of the world. And then next time it'll be easier to say no to a specific bigger request.
Yeah, and I know we have many women from BlackRock on this call who've done the Art of the Ask program. And if there's anyone here who's ever taken a negotiation class, you've learned that part of learning to negotiate requires practicing negotiating. So you go out and you kind of awkwardly force yourself to negotiate over something small in a daily setting. Maybe it's, I don't know, the fee for a house repair, something like that. And it's often uncomfortable at first because you're not used to it. But the more you practice, the easier it becomes. Well, it's the same with saying no. Practice actually makes perfect. So we really want you all to see real results from this webinar. And all of our programs really are about encouraging women to take action and really try the tools out directly for yourselves and see how they work. So we want you to actually take a moment right now and think of something that you can say no to in the next week. And actually, Lisa and I are going to do this with you. So take a moment and think of something you can say no to in the next week. You can, if you need to look at your calendar briefly, although we encourage not multitasking during these, but think of something you want to say no to in the next week. Okay, and once you have that thing, we want you to write down an action step. An action step has a what and a by when. So you're going to write down what you're going to say no to and by when you will say no to this. And we want you to actually take out a pen and write this down. The research shows you're more likely to follow through on something if you write it down. Okay, great. I'll share a snippet of mine just to give you an example. My 3-year-old daughter is going to summer camp last week, and she's kind of in a transition before her school starts. And because I'm an entrepreneur with a flexible schedule, and we have a part-time nanny who doesn't drive, I ended up dropping her off and picking her up at camp every day. And it was creating this very disjoint schedule for me. And so I'm going to say no to driving my daughter to and from camp.
And we hope your husband will say yes. All right, the second thing is to trust your body. So if something feels heavy in your body or just feels wrong, or you kind of get that request and immediately you have a gut sense of no, try to honor that. Or if you feel light and free when you're considering it, then definitely say yes. So you can learn how to recognize your own internal signals and ignore the pressures that others put on you. And this is something that can actually, your skill in this can be built through a meditation practice like our 30-day meditation challenge, which is a program that some of you might be doing right now, but it's 5 minutes a day of meditation. We send you a guided audio. It's very easy, but it can help you learn to trust your body more.
Yeah, and this is one too that, again, gets better with practice where, and the great news is if you just tune into your body, even if you don't listen to what it says, let's say there's some event and you get you're kind of like, ugh, it just feels heavy in my body, I'm not like excited to go, and then you go and you have an awful time. Okay, you didn't listen to your body, but you actually got confirmation that your body's signals were dead on. So Lisa and I recently were meeting with someone who wanted to collaborate with us on a project, and I just had this feeling in my body like, I don't want to go to this meeting, I don't feel like I should be there. And I said yes anyway, and then we went, and afterwards we both agreed that was not the best use of our time. And so sometimes I don't listen to my body, but then it still confirms, I can still get confirmation on whether or not, my body's signals are leading me in the direction I want. So just tuning in and noticing, do you feel like light and free and happy when you think of going to this certain event or doing this thing, or do you feel kind of constriction or tightness or heaviness in your body? Tuning into those sensations. So the third step is to practice awareness and compassion. And recognize, you just heard from the research, that it's normal to be worried about someone not liking you if you refuse a request. So feeling guilty or afraid that people will not trust you or value your opinion is also normal. And many times these are the reasons we keep saying yes. We want to be liked or we feel guilty. Even when we're exhausted and we simply don't have the time, we keep saying yes. And so here's the deal. These fears and beliefs won't go away overnight. But you can choose a new outcome by saying no, even though it feels scary. So part of this is about recognizing that it's normal for you to be scared or feel guilty when saying no, and just noticing that, but then not allowing that to stop you from saying no.
Great. And step number 4 is don't apologize. There's nothing to be sorry for. You haven't done anything wrong when your answer is no. So instead, start with an appreciation and end with a no. This is one of the best ways to kind of ease the blow versus saying, sorry, no. You can appreciate the person and then say no, and that helps you feel a little better, and it makes it a nicer delivery. So you tell the other person what you appreciate about him or her, and then say your firm no. So for example, I appreciate you for reaching out and seeing, I can see it's important to you to connect and get advice to build your business. However, I won't be able to get together in person at this time. I wish you luck as you expand your business. So that is a message that's concrete, and you appreciate the person. It's not rude at all, and it's solid.
Yeah, I actually got one of these appreciation sandwich no's. I received one from Brene Brown. I write for Forbes, and I had actually reached out to her for an interview and got back the kindest no I've ever heard. And it actually made me want to work with her even more because it left a really good impression. So you don't need to worry that, the person's going to think badly of you, because if you handle this with grace and do an appreciation sandwich, the person might actually remember you favorably even though you're saying no.
So when you feel bad or uncertain about saying no, it makes the situation just more awkward. People are going to respond to your guilt and the fact that you're tentative. So they're more likely to push back and try to convince you to change your mind. So be as clear as you can, be concise, and be confident in your no.
How many of you have had that situation, just you can virtually raise your hands, where you're kind of waffling on something, you want to say no, but you're not being clear, and the person keeps pushing you and keeps pushing you and keeps pushing you, and you kind of maybe get irritated with them. Well, here's the interesting thing. We're contributing to that, because when you're wishy-washy about your no, it's as though you've left the door halfway open. And so the person thinks, oh, well, maybe I'll get a foot through here.
Yeah.
They keep trying. So that's why you really need to shut the door all the way when you say no and be really clear.
Yeah, and then when you do that too, it's easier to say no up front rather than having to back out of a commitment later after saying yes when you really meant no. So
yeah, how many of you have had that awkward situation?
Yep.
That's the worst.
That really is the worst. And then here is a little advanced trick. So when the request comes in email form and it's not a verbal request, we have a little more time to noodle over it. So I bet everyone can think of one example that they had in their inbox, an event, an invitation to an event or some sort of request that rather than saying no, it's just sitting there festering in the inbox. Yep.
Yeah, I have one of those right now.
Yep, I definitely have one of those. Someone wanting a coffee date that I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this, and it's just sitting there rather than saying a no. So I would like everyone to take an action step now and think about that one email or one unresponded to request that you really want to say no. That's why you've been delaying getting back to the person. And then I'd like you to write down an appreciation sandwich of what you could write back to that person to give a nice but firm no.
So think of something you can appreciate about them and then say a firm no. So just jot down a couple of sentences of what you want to say to that person or organization.
And this could be a personal thing too. You could have a request for a birthday party that you just would rather be at home reading a book. And so pick your example and write down that appreciation sandwich.
And here's the deal with these incomplete emails. When you have, an email in your inbox or a request from someone that you haven't responded to, it's actually a drain on our energy to have these kinds of incompletes. And you know how sometimes you go and you clean out your closet or you clean out your office and you get this wave of energy afterwards because you've gotten rid of all this junk you didn't like? Well, it's kind of the same with saying no to some of these requests. When you actually take the time, sort of force yourself to sit down and write that, what might feel awkward email, and you fire off a couple of those, you're going to feel this energy come into you because without even being aware in kind of the back of your mind, it's draining on your energy emotionally to have these incomplete outstanding. So we encourage you to send that email today after you get off the call. So the next step to learning how to say no with ease is to be short and confident in your no. And we touched on this a little bit already, but it's really important. When you feel bad or uncertain about saying no, it does make the situation more awkward. And people respond to your guilt, and they're more likely to push back and try to convince you to change your mind. So you want to be clear, concise, and confident. Clear, concise, and confident. So for example, you might say, I'm not going to be able to meet you for coffee this week. Thank you for the invitation. You don't need to explain why you're saying no. And as Lisa mentioned, you'll find it a lot easier to say no up front rather than say yes and have to backpedal. And one thing that I've found as a phrase that really works for me right now is a sentence, especially with family members, to just say, that isn't going to work for me. That isn't going to work for me. It's simple, it's straightforward and to the point. And the other thing I've noticed about myself is that sometimes I get angry when I'm saying no, which really turns people off. And it's because it's hard for me to say no, and so then I'll be defensive and can be angry instead of being calm and straightforward.
So the sixth item is to start a no club. So peer support is incredibly powerful. You can get together with a group of colleagues and discuss what everyone wished they'd said no to in the last month. So you can ask the group to hold each other accountable in these situations going forward. So you can check in at least once a month or perhaps every week in the beginning and just be like, hey, let's recap on what you need to say no on, where you were good, where you missed, and you can find that you can really support each other that way.
Yeah, it's almost like a book club for saying no.
Yeah.
And it really does, it's so helpful when you have other people. And then you can laugh at all the different things you're trying to say no to that you maybe did or didn't and support each other.
Yeah, and the next one is to focus on your yes. And I have a client that I was working with who had a friend who kept asking her to walk her dogs on the weekends. And she was like, I don't have a dog because I don't want to have the responsibility of having to walk the dog every weekend. And my friend keeps asking, and I feel so bad saying no because, you know what, I don't have weekend plans. So she was saying this specifically for a Friday night a couple weeks ago. She's like, well, I don't have any plans, so I feel bad saying no. She knows that I'm not going to a party or I don't have any dinner plans. But the truth is I'm on the edge of burnout. I'm so exhausted. I'm maxed out at work, and I really need some downtime. So when I told her, how about if you focus on your yes, which is really that you need to rest and recharge and go to sleep early, can you do that? Focus on that so that it's easier to say no to your friend, to say, hey, look, I'm really feeling burnt out and I need to take care of myself. So I know I don't have social plans, but I can't walk your dog.
Yeah, it's a great example. And it really is so much easier to say no when you have a clear picture of what you want to say yes to instead. So, for example, if you're invited to an event over the weekend that you feel like you, quote, unquote, should attend, and by the way, anytime you hear yourself saying you should do something, that's a great moment to step back and notice and check in with your body and see if this maybe is a time to practice saying no. So let's say there's an event that over the weekend that you feel like you should attend, but you'd really rather stay home and, take a bath and read your favorite book. Well, picture yourself doing that when you go to tell the person no. It's actually easier to be confident and clear with your no if you envision what you're going to be saying yes to instead. So great, these are some of the 7 tips that we have to help you say no with greater ease.